All right, well, fantastic. For everyone, I want to welcome Leigh Woosey to Continuing Conversations, which is, of course, anything and everything about Star Trek Adventures. We talk about the writers, we talk about the artists, we talk about the fans. Leigh, why don't you introduce yourself to us, to our audience, and what your role is at with Star Trek Adventures?
Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Leigh Woosey. I am a graphic designer. I've been working in the tabletop game industry for about 10 years. And earlier this year, I was brought on by Modiphius as a freelancer to work on the Shackleton Expanse.
Wonderful. I know we have a lot of details in the written interview that you were so kind to give me before. So if people want to look into some of your background, it's fantastic, your history and the path that brought you to Modiphius and the Star Trek Adventures gaming. But what we wanted to talk today was about one of your latest pieces of work and what I think everyone's drooling over right now, and that's the Shackleton Expanse Resource Guide. And so even sitting in back of you, we see some of the art there, but let's get started first. Before we start breaking down the art and let you know what I've been hearing through fandom about it, talk to us a little bit about graphic designer from Modiphius. How does that, you talked a little bit about in the written interview, but talk to us about that process and what you do and how that's structured at Modiphius.
So Modiphius are a really great team to work with because they're really supportive and they always make sure you have all the information you need to start with. They put out a call on various social network sites for freelance graphic designers. So I already had a portfolio that was suitable for that kind of work. So I got in touch and they liked what they saw and they gave me the opportunity to work with them on Shackleton Expanse. They have a big team of freelancers and in-house designers, so they have a really clear idea about what they want, and they have a lot of well set up structures to make sure that the work goes really quickly. We had a really big manuscript by Jim Johnson mostly that had everything we needed in there, and it was a case of going through that and making sure that we were going to structure the book in such a way that we were giving the readers the story of the Expanse, but also giving them all they needed to find about the features and the spatial phenomena to build their own story and start exploring the sandbox for themselves.
Love it. I'm glad that you said sandbox, actually. I spoke with Jim before in a previous interview that the challenge he has with coming up with illustrations is having them with enough detail to pull you in, but enough width that any GM can adapt them to your story. And I was so happy that I got to interview you today because there were some illustrations that I definitely want to go to breakdown mode with you and talk to you about. In fact, let's go ahead and start with what's right behind you right now. That's one of my favorite illustrations from the Shackleton Expanse Guide. What is it? Where did it come from?
So there was a need to provide some artwork to complement the text of the spatial phenomena and the various features and locations in the Expanse. And we were looking at a number of approaches. We thought about having some artwork, but we realized there was a better place for that later on in the book to illustrate the system generation tables, because there was some beautiful stuff and we wanted to get people inspired to use that to come up with their own systems and own stellar phenomena. So we had a look at the Astrometrics. Obviously, it's a big deal in Voyager. So we took the graphics from Voyager and how they tend to look at the galaxy and to display the stories going on in there, and also from the scene in Star Trek Nemesis, and that's where the border for this graphic comes from. It's from the view screen when Data and Picard are looking at Astrometrics and they're going into the Besson Rift and about to be ambushed.
Oh, cool Easter egg. Thank you for letting us know that.
Yeah, so we do a lot of that, and there's stuff we've gone from all over the graphics, from all over the Star Trek television series, from the animated series, from the original series, anything we could take inspiration from. Even the technical manuals, rated all the Star Trek technical manuals by Michael Okuda and others for anything that was really cool that we could adapt and turn into a cool graphic, something to really get the imagination going. And in this case, we took the style of how things were presented, sort of in that Nemesis post-Voyager era, and looked at how do we give an impression of what's in the Expanse, because there wasn't a set map for the Expanse. There was a feeling that that's for the players to come up with through their adventures. We didn't want to put like limits on that, but it's really inspiring for people just to have a hint of where things are or where things might be. So we have this kind of map, and if you're keen-eyed, and you work it out, you can probably figure out which ones are which based on their locations, based on similarities to the text or other graphics.
Let's get to that in a second, because I just want to play off something before we run by it too fast. As part of working with Modiphius, and you were talking about all this reference material, you have access to the full whatever's owned by CBS when it comes to Star Trek, right?
Yeah, so Jim was gatekeeper for that, but he was really generous in giving access and making sure we had things retrieved, and we found some amazing things like the original graphics, the original vector graphics for the Runabout project patch, which we put in there because it's such a cool little piece of information that really gets across that these are workhorses of the Federation, that they go everywhere and do everything. And there's other graphics that we were able to expand on. So we had access to the illustrations for the Akira class, and the Thunderchild is such a player in the campaign. So I thought, well, I'll take that and I'll expand on some of the details on that. And then we'll turn that into a cool graphic between the page settings of the chapters, and add just a little bit more from the technical manuals as well, so that we get a more complete image of the ship itself.
So I have to ask you, I mean, you know, again, going back to the written interview, you're a Star Trek fan. How does that feel to have that kind of access and then let loose?
It's loads of fun, especially having the opportunity and the reason to go through the technical manuals, which I remember sort of really envying and lusting after as a little nerdy teenager in the UK in the 1990s, because I thought they were the coolest thing, and now I've got a chance just to read through them and turn them into things. Having access to graphics is really helpful. There's some really useful branding kits that we're able to pull information and imagery from CBS, and that all got turned into something. So we'd either used it wholesale or was the start for something. So we started adapting, you know, console graphics from the background of the TOS bridge to add decoration to the TOS era missions.
Yeah, and it's amazing because with that, like in the Shackleton Expanse, you can actually see the change even to the Klingon missions, the coloration and stuff like that. And the reason I want to highlight this to people is for those who are just flipping past the pages and going past the art, I think it's important to stop, look at the art, because if you're trying to provide visuals for your players during the game, you have a lot of stories you can extract, which gets us back to the scan behind you. Now, I like to throw in this little fun fact I told you about, Leigh, is Aaron Paulier, who wrote the Spatial Phenomenons chapter in the Shackleton Expanse. He's one of my regular players. So when I saw this map and I knew that, then I was like, oh, Aaron, what's what here? And you never had a conversation with Aaron about this, right?
No, I just looked at the descriptions, and they were so detailed and so interrelated. It was really fun to figure out where things could be, and just give a nice impression of you know, what would a gravimetric hazard look like on a view screen, and generate these kind of vortices and these radiating waves. And we put a lot of energy into making sure that those graphics worked, and they worked across different formats for the readers to have as well.
Yeah, and I want to say, yeah, it's adaptable too, right? I don't want people to think it's a hard and fast rule when they're looking at this. And give you a sample conversation, the 3 dots up in the upper quadrant of this, in the mid upper quadrant, I was like, oh, that's the triplets. And then Aaron's like, no, that's not how I pictured it. I think it's lower right hand corner. You know, so talk to us about when you were designing this and you were reading through the descriptions, how you were still able to keep it ambiguous enough, and what your encouragement to players is and how to use it.
Well, what I would say is that these are things that you as a GM can say, well, you're sort of heading over here, or you can maybe zoom in on the PDF and say, well, this is kind of what it looks like, or you can just ignore the rest of it if you want to focus on one particular feature or another. And that's why we've kept it to numbers. We've not labeled anything. You know, if you ever look at the Kudagram graphics, they're full of numbers, so we'll use those instead of letters, and we're not going to hide any codes in this one. We've hidden things elsewhere, but we're not going to hide anything in these. So people can just say, well, you're approaching this, and this is the sort of thing, and, you know, this is like something you might glance at briefly in your briefing around the conference table, just to get an impression that, you know, this is actually quite a dangerous place. You're going to have to really pilot very carefully around this territory.
Yeah, we decided we can't go past warp 3 in this place because it's so crazy, which slows the game down, which is nice and stuff. The just so people would know, the piece of art there, it kind of shows a little galaxy, what looks like a galaxy or a star cluster. That would be what, magnification of spatial anomalies?
Yeah. So it might be a star that has begun to decay because it's too close to a gravimetric shear, or it could be a protostar that's forming. These are very beautiful images. Some of them are NASA images, some of them are Hubble images, just like we used to see in Voyager. And they're there for people to take inspiration from and say, well, actually, this thing we're going to feature in our campaign today, it's going to be this thing, and I'll point it out, and we'll say, yeah, imagine this, and this is the kind of thing that you're going to be seeing on your view screen.
This is so incredibly fun. I just want you to know, like, just for a writer, same thing with an artist, is like a piece like this is literally inspiring for us 10 games. And so I really appreciate it. Yeah, and we're hearing a lot of love from the fandom too. They're just going crazy over that. Show us another piece. Or is there anything else you want to tell us about this before we look at it?
Well, so I'll show you something that was quite fun. Was taking graphics like this, which in this case was from TOS era, when they're looking at some systems that they're approaching. Well, how do we adapt those very 60s graphics but make them modern enough to fit into a contemporary book? So we really lent into the nice graphical features, almost like an orrery or a military sphere, showing the distances, relative distances between the planets and their orbits, because the fact that these planets are very carefully placed in the system is an interesting plot point. And then we've got some starlings like depicting the magnetic clouds and the hazard symbol, which was very briefly on screen in an episode of the animated series. And I thought, oh, that's a great graphic. Let's see if we can adapt that and turn it into something.
Oh, wow. Do you remember the reference exactly? Do you remember the reference exactly on that?
I don't remember the exact episode. Because what I did was I went through the entire animated series on high speed on Netflix, scrubbing through every scene until I got to a great graphic. And I just started the next episode without keeping track of where it came from.
You're a champ. You're a champ for that. We'll leave it out to the fans to tell us where it's from, and they'll respond in the comments. That'll be cool.
Can
you go back 1 second? I had a question.
Absolutely.
So what are you using two different programs to design the graphics and then the other one for the layout? I know there's going to be some people who want to know how you're doing this.
Okay. So for book layout, you will mostly use Adobe InDesign if you're using Adobe software. There are alternatives like those put together by Serif. I use Adobe software because I'm trained in it and I have the most experience with it. And so I use Adobe InDesign and Adobe Illustrator for vector graphics. And these are mostly just because they're the quickest and most powerful tools for accomplishing those tasks.
I'm going to ask
they're what the industry uses at the moment.
And you said a word, something graphics, spectrographics, you said?
Vector graphics. Okay, so for those who are just starting out, graphics come in roughly two kinds. There's bitmap graphics, and those are essentially an image split into squares. And things like JPEGs or PNGs are ways of compressing the data of those squares in such a way that it will fool the eye, that you haven't lost too much quality, but will take shortcuts and shrink the file size down. And then there's vector graphics, which represent everything as a mathematical representation of lines and colors and boundaries between shapes.
Thank you. You got to give us the technobabble. You got
it. Really technobabble. So the graphics like the one on the screen we've got at the moment, because we want them to be precise and clear and easy to zoom in on, we make those in vector graphics because being mathematical, you could enlarge them in principle infinitely. Whereas with a bitmap, as soon as you enlarge it to a certain extent, you'll start seeing the squares, or you'll see where the format has tried to cheat the eye and compress the file down.
That's awesome. Very good. Thank you. I know some people would want to learn that question. We have a lot of people who are not only aspiring writers, but students who may want to go into graphics and so many options. So I like having them know where to start looking. Cool. All right. Sorry. Go ahead and move on to your next illustration.
Well, just to continue that theme of taking things from TOS and seeing if we can give them a bit of a modern twist and make good use of them to tell the story of the campaign, we adapted the map, which is one of my favorite graphics from the original series of the neutral zone from, I believe, the Balance of Terror, where they're chasing a Romulan, what at that point is a prototype Romulan warbird. and they have to skirt the edge of the neutral zone. There's an incredible tension presented by the map as they're doing that in the episode. It's one of my favorite TOS episodes. And so we took the map from that. I think, well, what happens if we try to apply that to the Shackleton Expanse? And very deliberately in the corner I said, unexplored space, because they haven't even given this thing proper names yet. So it's even vaguer, even more mysterious in the 2200s.
Nice. And what I like,
in the later era.
Yeah, what I like about that too, Jim's let us know that when CBS and Modiphius were talking about building the maps for the Shackleton Expanse, it's to the galactic east of the Romulan and Klingon empires. The Federation's drifting over there a little bit, and they basically told him, it's yours. This is your area of space, and do what you will with it. So that's kind of exciting that you have this map now that really brings it into canon, because you're pulling it from a canon episode. So that's awesome.
So we've got things like space station and using the space station codes from the original series and the other map books that came out roughly at the time of Enterprise, and you're trying to figure out where Archer is, which planet is Planet Archer, and then we've got Klingon area. I was thinking of calling it the Organian Treaty Zone, but I thought that was perhaps a little bit too wordy. So we've just got the neutral zone and the planet Dederidex from the Star Trek maps there, so that people who've come to the campaign with a knowledge will find that actually it's compatible with the previous lore that they've experienced and the books that they bought.
Very awesome. Very awesome. Again, why we break down every single one of these illustrations. And when you say this, my mind all of a sudden goes to all the games I'm playing. Like, oh, I need to add the Organian Treaty area into that. Very nice. Again, beautiful design. You're given also, I'm looking also to the picture with the Klingon cook over there. You're given those from a bunch of different artists. How do you decide on where to place them in the book? Is Jim editing that for you?
So we look at, so Jim has, will make a suggestion, although not all authors would. So Jim will make a suggestion where something should go. We try to match that as much as possible while still keeping the readability of the text as optimized as possible, because we wouldn't want to move this higher up in the page and that knock a paragraph onto the next page, so you've got a paragraph all its own. So you have to make judgments about where to put things so that you're keeping the flow of the text as natural as possible.
Okay, well, really,
and also trying to keep them close and relevant to the story.
Good. I like it.
That's part of the battle of layout, is making things fit in that way, and always keeping an eye on the flow of the readability and how the reader is going to understand each page and each page spread to learn what they want to from what they're reading. Yeah,
I mean, I've seen the evolution of the original core rulebook through the Klingon and then now to this one. And this to me is, I mean, it's so thick and packed with so much stuff, but this is definitely the most legible one, readable for readability factor. And again, I tell people the benefit of the PDF is, of course, Control F, quick searching words to get you around. But the hard copy, again, is going to give you is very readable. Have it by my head.
So we put a lot of effort, because it's such a big book. And because I know from my experiences of playing Star Trek Adventures, you can have a really great scene going, and then suddenly you've got to stop and start scrolling for rules or thumbing through pages for rules. So we put a lot of effort into hyperlinking all the page references and hyperlinking the index just to make it quicker and easier on the GM or on the players when you want to look something up. We did that, and then we had some feedback from the community, and then we added our PDF bookmarks to on top of that as well, so that the contents were more easily findable and easier to search.
Yep, it's definitely excellent. Good. Any other Easter eggs you want to show us? Any other items that we can do?
So
I know there's so many.
Let's have a look at some fun layouts. So one of my favorite things, I think has been a favorite in the team, was this graphic, which was there to help balance a page visually by filling out some space. And I thought, well, I think we need to give the tribbles a bit more attention, but we need to identify just how dangerous they are. So it's got a little Federation biohazard symbol taken from prop from TNG there.
I love it.
And I like we put little things on the buttons that I think were appropriate.
This is cool. I was just watching the new season of Discovery, and I thought I saw a tribble that had somehow became a member, but they're saying it's a Horta, which I don't know.
It could be a baby Horta. Maybe it's a tribble that's taken a vow of celibacy.
That's what I was wondering. So this is good. We'll have to. That's a whole story in itself. And again, I just have to ask because I look at all the numbers all the time that you put into the L cards. They're totally random. Pulled out your butt. What? Like, how do you put those numbers in?
So the numbers are generally random, but what I will do is I try not to have too many repeating patterns of numbers, because if your eye spots those, it can actually pull you away from what you're meant to be looking at, which would be the graphics or would be the text. There's something. So there's some graphics where in the original series they put the producers' names, and I've put the names of the art directors and the editors in. So I think they deserve all the credit and love they can get. There's a little bit. So one of my sort of other favorite things I put in was, you've got to check your baffle plates, because otherwise very bad things can happen. So I thought we'd better put that as a button in for one of the graphics. But those are kind of things we wanted to put in just to acknowledge the love that the readers have for Star Trek and the level of knowledge that they have, and to show that we share it and that we appreciate how much love they put into the product. Where
exactly is the baffle plate again?
The baffle plate must have something to do with the warp core, because it emits delta rays if you don't put it on properly. So it's got to have something to do with the radiation from the warp core.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. We can start writing off of that. Awesome.
And there's other things. So there's some graphics where things are classified. If you know how to spot a Romulan warbird that's cloaked, you might find one somewhere.
I was looking for this. I can't find it yet. Are you going to tell us where it's at?
Well, what I will say is that throughout
the star
TNG era, there are various telltale signs we can look for when scanning for cloaked warbirds. You might find them in some of the graphics if you're careful.
That neutrino effect, that shifting star effect, is what I was looking for, but I don't know if I'm right on that.
No, it's a bit more subtle than that, but I don't want to spoil it in case people want to go hunting.
Well, can I ask how many there are? Because then I can start playing.
There's just one, but it's but I don't want to give away too much of it. So if you have a look around the various scans of the station, you might find something.
I'm going to put this: the first person when we post this interview, the first person who gets it right on continuing mission, on the comments section, I'm going to send you a starter set. I'm saying that now. I'm vowing that here because I'm dying to know, and I hate suspense. And so I'll confirm with you, Leigh, the first person who puts a comment and gets it right, you'll confirm it, and then that person, I'm sending you a starter set.
Okay, fair enough. So, I mean, it's great to explore things in the graphics and put Easter eggs there. Like, for example, on the Marauder model had this extending sort of attack pose that was only ever seen in the first Stargazer episode early on in TNG, and the model was too complicated for them to keep doing it. But we just hinted to that the weapons are retracted in this particular graphic, because it's really nice to hint at something that you could then turn into a scene or describe as a GM if you're dealing with particularly aggressive Ferengi traders.
That's epic. See, I didn't know that. I'm missing all this stuff. Now you're making me have to go through the book the 15th time. Keep going.
And then we just we spent some time. So we put a plot point here about a particular kind of runabout that we reference elsewhere in the book, and just to tie the book together, we're going to put a graphic together demonstrating what it looks like, but not going into too much detail to leave room for people to explore and explain in their own terms. So there's lots of things here that are classified, but a GM might want to talk about when it comes to bringing it up in the game.
This is really good, especially for players who want to design their own ships. Every time I'm online, people are asking what goes where and who goes. It's like, design your own ships. There's a endless variety of ships. So I love schematics like this that people can pull into their game.
Yeah, and we've got sort of details like there's a hidden warbird, but there's a very visible warbird with lots of explanations as to where things are taken from. Various interviews with the model makers and designers from TNG, so that if people want to explore a warbird in their games, they put the option to describe where things might be relative to the structure of the ship.
Wonderful, very good. More Easter eggs, more.
And so we just anything to help bring the world alive, like the rank structure for the original series uniforms. That's a really fun thing that people might want to have or might want to refer to, and it helps bring them back into the Star Trek universe as they're reading through and they're taking in the information about the player characters, and things like depicting the Lexington as through the historical archive from the TNG sections, just to show that there's a chronological difference between the two sections. Those are just the things that we think about as we go along, and we want to just help tell the story to the players as they read through.
Nice. Cool. So now give me, some advice. Let's finish up with, talking again, advice. There's a lot more products coming out between now and, as far as I know, 2023. There's a lot more. I mean, everything from the modules to mission briefs and other things that will be coming out. Give your advice for why you would say people have a PDF or maybe also a hard copy, or does it make a difference? What do you think about that?
I think people should go with what they feel most comfortable with, because both products are awesome. It's really lovely to own a book, even if it's not your primary reference for the campaign. So if you want to have both, treat yourself to both. It's a beautiful product, loads of stuff in it. With the PDF, we made a big effort this time to increase the accessibility of the PDF. So we changed the view settings for how it handles hyperlinks so that people who need to adjust for vision impairments don't have an issue with it, or have less of an issue with it than they might otherwise. We've got so much packed into the book. There's a sensation to reading through a book because we put everything on a double page spread, and we work carefully to pace the storytelling with the turning of the page, that you will get a unique experience if you choose to go with the book product.
Yeah, exactly. And my first one fell apart, so already I'm on my second one. So the book product does get a lot of use. And so again, as a designer, anything else you want us to keep our eyes open to? I'll give you an example. Jim had highlighted that in the mission brief section, before we would focus on one role, and it was designed to that color. But then there's a secondary role, and so put into the LCARs was maybe the secondary role color. And I love stuff like that because it made me go back through and say, oh, okay, I see these are adaptable. So anything else before we wrap up of things as a graphic designer you want us to take notice of so that we all go back to our book?
I have to put aside how proud we all are of the book and be humble and say that my job as a graphic designer isn't to distract you, but to make it as easy and enjoyable to read the book as possible. So if you don't notice the graphic design, that means it's doing its job.
I love that. You are the most humble graphic designer I've ever met. You get that award. That's fantastic. Okay, well, cool. Well, the Shackleton Expanse book is, of course, doing really well on the different. It's really popular. I know it jump-started and excited a lot of players who had played through the original Living campaign and were dying for its release. So I want to thank you personally, Leigh, for putting your heart into it. The quality is exceptional. And anything else you want to say to the Star Trek fans?
Well, keep playing. We really love your input and your feedback, and it's a big thrill for us that you're enjoying it so much.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, we look forward to seeing more of your work. I really appreciate not only the verbal interview you gave us, the written interview, but coming on to show off some of the work here. I know it means a million. It means so much to the fans and to me and everybody, so we really appreciate it.
You're very, very welcome. It's been great.